for the 850 million denials a year, which was our stat that then became Wall Street Journal stat that then got picked up by other companies. So now no one knows.
Isn't that crazy? Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Right? How many claims are denied? I don't know. How much? I don't know.
Why do you guys not know?
Because the only people who have the data are the insurers, and they're not telling. We're now in a position where we've got enough data that not only can we see evidence of like RICO type conspiracy cases between insurers and other parties, but we also have enough evidence for class actions, which we're about to start filing. So that's going to be super fun.
No one wants to admit it, but this space is littered with zombie companies that get there and never get anywhere else because they can never become the systems of record because of who owns the space. My fear for early founders and lifers folks have been this a long time, thinking they're going to kind of come in rosy-cheeked, get their $5 million seed and off to the races. I do worry about that because you will start to see folks get itchy when we're at 14, 15, 16 months into an enterprise sales cycle, even if you have the great technology.
Welcome back to Lifers, a podcast from Second Opinion about all the crazy people who continue to want to change healthcare, even though it's literally the hardest thing ever. And I am joined by two very good friends today who I would definitely put in the crazy camp along with myself. So first, I'm going to introduce my co-host. We're going to try out a new co-host today in Mike Desjadon. He's the CEO of Anomaly Health. He is so much fun to just chat with about everything in life, including like our sons and the revenue cycle management space and pretty much everything in between. So he's a big fan of our guest, Warris Bokhari. We're both big fans of our guest, who's the CEO of Claimable. And, Mike and I were talking about how we need to get Warris on the pod because we've both been seeing him really just like tear it up with all the media mentions and really kind of driving home how unfair it is for patients in this system. And very few people are willing to do that. So welcome, Warris. Welcome, Mike.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So excited to kick this off. And Warris, I'm so glad you could make it for this go. Aptly called lifers, a lot of dark circles under eyes on this call. So,
oh my God. This is why I keep the glasses on. I take them off and I look like I've been dragged through a hedge backward. I think lately. It's the startup jaundice of like never seeing daylight because you're working all the time also, as I'm sure you're very aware of.
From the daylight, not how you end your day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I was joking with these two that I need to send them a fruit basket, just like get some vitamin C in the system. So, I'll kick it off with a question, Warris, and then I'd love to hear kind of what Mike plans to grill you about.
Yeah.
But for me...
AMA. Ask me anything.
I love it. Yeah. So, Warris, you've had like quite the history in the space and in being a doctor in the UK, where we actually didn't meet in the UK. We met in America. So that's a different story. But you've been in big tech at companies like Apple and Amazon. And then you've also been in the world of health plans. You were an executive at Anthem. So, what made you like really want to make less money as a...
I am like...
I mean, you're both from the UK and I'm not, but I know what doctors in the UK get paid.
It's
so
like,
maybe not.
It's like nothing in England for sure. I mean, so like technically where I am is definitely a pay rise to even being a consultant or an attending in England. But it is a lot of hours and a lot of work. And I think what made me actually want to do a startup again, so I did one to begin like when I first moved to the US, which is when Chrissy, you and I met.
Yeah.
Was I saw friends of mine in the startup grind. And after being in corporate for a while, I kind of envied how tired they were. And like, it's totally ludicrous, but like they were working on things they loved and were passionate about and they felt would move the needle. And I remember like seeing a friend of mine who was just passed out on my couch and he was like meant to come over for like half an hour. And then he ended up like sleeping for like a good 14 hours straight. And I was like, I remember just like kind of looking at him and being like, I wonder what that feels like to really care about what you're doing. Because in large companies, the thing that matters most is the activity, not the outcome. Whereas when you're in a small company, the only thing that matters is the outcome. The, reporting activities to people, no one cares. They don't care that you're tired and working super hard. That's great. Get it done. And when you're working on something patient facing, the only thing that matters for us is getting that patient covered. So it ended up being like that kind of full circle type journey. And it was kind of prompted by just being an awful employee. I remember being being in like, let's say a corporate office in the Bay Area and them talking about Gretchen Rubin's 4 tendencies. And I like had all the worst tendencies to be like an employee who didn't ask questions. I was definitely like a questioner rebel who, you know, if a work was stupid, I did not want to do it. And I would speak up and give my opinion. And like, I'll be clear, nobody was asking. I would offer it anyway. And, you know, it didn't make me a lot of friends. And then I think when I went to Anthem, I bulldozed through corporate bureaucracy to try and get this asthma work done, because it was the only thing that mattered to me, being an asthmatic and wanting to like prove digital health could work. I just like tried to steamroll as much as I could. We got it done. It's like the study came out in JAMA. People can use this to show how digital health can actually help patients. But good God, it was like crawling across 15 football fields of broken glass on my knees. Like it was unbelievably painful. And there were probably at least 4 different occasions where I had to put my badge on the desk and being like, unless we do this, I'm out, in order to get it done. I'm glad it's out there and I hope people use it. And I hope that it, you know, does this. But the only thing it turned out I cared about was like really trying to make healthcare better. I didn't care about the reindeer games. I didn't care about any of the other stuff. I just wanted to like make this make sense. It is all completely ludicrous and it needs to change.
Mike, you clearly don't relate to any of that. The football fields full of glass or the...
Well, I didn't know I'm so confused now. Which football field? You said football, but then field and not pitch. So I'm confused about how much glass we're walking through.
I've lived in the US for a while.
Very good. Well, I love what you do. And I think for the folks that are listening, you know, I know we kind of live this every day, but not everybody does. So tell us about Claimable. You know, when you say this asthma work and, you know, working with patients, for us jaded folks with gray hair that have been in the rev cycle a long time, being direct to consumer is pretty new. So tell us a little bit about Claimable, what you're doing. And when you say this asthma work, what do you mean?
Well, I just shaved my beard, but it was looking pretty gray as well. But if I'd known, I could have skipped that. So look, Claimable is predicated on the idea that the payment model in healthcare is not serving anyone, right? It doesn't serve the patients who are often denied and have no access to care. It doesn't serve providers who get, you know, pushed out of network for, let's say, speaking up to insurers, and we'll come back to that later. It doesn't even serve the insurers. Wall Street is frankly having a referendum on United Health right now, telling them how much they suck. So, but yet we've got a whole industry of, you know, investors and entrepreneurs and everybody who's defending this payment model like it's like, I don't know, the route to salvation for all of mankind. It is not. It does not work. It needs to go away. But in the interim, and I'm not smart enough to architect that, right? But in the interim, there are a lot of people currently on Earth who, in the US, who are insured, who cannot get access to medications their insurer says they will cover. And the reasons are ludicrous. And oftentimes the insurer is not following their own policies or criteria. The patient has tried everything, failed a bunch of other things. Sometimes it's people who need transplants who are really up against it and have like days or, you know, maybe a week or two to get something resolved. And I just see people really on the margins, and they are very, very easy marks for insurers. So this is a very non-traditional tech company. And effectively, we automated the patient appeal, because what patients don't know is that for the 850 million denials a year, which was our stat that then became Wall Street Journal stat that then got picked up by other companies, so now no one knows. And it was...
Well, hey, isn't that crazy? Pause that for a second. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Right? How many claims are denied? I don't know. How much?
Well,
don't know.
Why do you guys not know?
Because the only people who have the data are the insurers, and they're not telling, right?
Okay. Yeah. Fair.
So we will, right? We will absolutely make this public as soon as we have enough data for it to be statistical. But like, let me tell you, right? When that Wall Street Journal article came out in February, AHIP got on the phone to WSJ saying like, yeah, AHIP really want to talk to you. Like, I'm like, talk to me. I don't want to talk to AHIP. Forget that. I'll probably burst into flames. They're really unhappy with these numbers. And I was like, well, give us the real numbers. Like, you guys are in a position to know you're the hand in the sock puppet of the insurers, like, you know, giving out the propaganda. So like, give us the words. No. So we will do it. But anyway, patients don't know they can appeal. Appealing is super hard for a lot of people who are sick and, and or a caregiver and or have kids, we've turned it into like a 20 to 30 minute process of the patient being able to give us very easy information. We then merge it with the clinical evidence that actually supports the use of that treatment in that care. And then the laws based on their plan type, where they live, where their plan was purchased, etc. And then it basically gets sent to the insurer. And we also copy all of our regulators as well, which is super fun. So then you get like pension plans who start like looking into, Blue Cross Blue Shield Alabama, for example, or whatever for, steering patients or whatever it happens to be, or Blue Cross Blue Shield Illinois. I'll just be an equal opportunity offender. And why not just say Cigna? But they start, it's the people start asking questions, right? And if you're an insurance executive and you're sitting in, I don't know, Indianapolis, and you get, letters from 2 attorneys generals in different states on the same day, that's a pretty bad day. And it might make you think, it might make you ask the question, what are we really denying and should we be denying it? And it might also help you recognizing your members as what they really are, which is human beings, like people who have real lives, real problems, who are coming to you for help and you're turning them away.
Yeah. Wow. And it seems like I can think of a couple companies that tried to get on the side of patients in healthcare, especially in the rev cycle space, the payment space. Most have failed, let's be honest.
Yes.
And a lot of that is because they couldn't actually get access to the information that they needed to be able to successfully get across the finish line, or maybe they just had a bad business model. They were trying to split some of the, savings or split some of whatever they got back from the patient. I think there have been a few things that just haven't worked. So, you've obviously talked to all those. You must know of all those companies. You must know why they failed. So tell us, what is your strategy to ensure that you don't end up in the graveyard of companies that tried to help patients?
I mean, look, I think anyone who can tell you that they have a great plan it makes sense until you get punched in the face, right, or whatever. So that it's that
a boxing fan. I like it.
Yeah. So,
Who is that famous scholar?
Yeah, Michael Tyson, I believe. But the point is that a lot of these companies were look, we can sit between, and there's one in particular, and you actually connected me to the founder, and I spoke to him, and great human, shared some insights with me, and a bunch of companies went down this path of sitting between the provider and the insurer, advocating for the patient to true up the bill. And all of those companies uniformly fail. And the reason why they do is because you're asking for two things that basically are undesirable. You're asking for the provider to charge less, and you're asking for the payer to pay more. And then the patient's stuck in the middle, and there's no natural incentive alignment, literally none. So how do you achieve that? And as a result, I think, in that case, the insurer was telling the patients that the company was committing fraud or whatever else. It was just super weird. It just puts the company in a tough spot of being a neutral advocate. Whereas for us, it's look, I'm never going to sell to insurers. There is a large part of me which believes your business should not exist. And sorry, not sorry. But on the other hand, if I can make the practice of medicine more efficient and help more patients get on guideline-directed therapy, then great. I acknowledge that the problem of overbilling is real. My neighbor came to me a couple of weeks ago for $70,000 bill from Cedars-Sinai, which is a cash register disguised as a hospital for an appendectomy.
I come to you a few weeks ago. My husband got charged $2,000 to go to an emergency room, sit there, then finally after 2 hours get a blood pressure reading, and then he left because it resolved, and then he got charged $2,000. Not one single person other than the one individual who came in and did the blood pressure cuff reading even did anything. It was just to sit there. We got charged $1,000 an hour sitting.
It's a great rate. I wish I could charge people that, but no one could pay it.
Anybody could come. If anybody wants to come sit in my house for $1,000 an hour, go for it.
I know. I mean, the other side of this is that there are a lot of companies who are out there who, I'll be politically correct somewhat. There are companies out there that I'm not going to politically correct. I'll just be honest. There are a lot of companies who charge success fees, and they don't realize that they are actually condemning patients to medical debt. So if you try and say, like, I'll appeal for you, say, for example, like Ed Stratton's liver denial, that's $1 million procedure, right? So if I was to say to him, like, Ed, we'll work for you if you can provide us 20% of a recovered care. You've got two inherent problems. Like, one, Ed may not have $200,000 sitting around in liquid cash that he can just give us for like no particular reason. Second thing is that you then have to reacquire of a customer if you're doing this via software, which is expensive. They've got no, like, I just don't know how that would work. Do you then send them to collection? Like, what is the mechanism? And this is like, you know, in my conversations with many investors, they're like, oh yeah, you should charge an upside fee. I'm like, absolutely not. Like, if you've read like An American Sickness by Elizabeth Rosenthal or any of the other great books in this space, like, Never Paid a First Bill by Marshall Allen, rest in peace. You kind of get the sense that like this kind of financial toxicity's got to stop. And so there's enough out there that if we have a low flat fee of, $50 per, if there are 850 million denials and some fraction of those are addressable, then yeah, sure, this becomes a sustainable business. And then there's, additionally other business models you can look at. To wit, we just brought on a litigator, which I don't know if you saw the release.
I saw that.
Came out
I did.
Yeah.
I was meaning to ask you about that. Yeah.
So we just brought on an insurance litigator. So like we're now in a position where we've got enough data that not only can we see evidence of like RICO type conspiracy type cases between insurers and other parties, shall we say, but we also have enough evidence for class actions, which we're about to start filing. So that's going to be super fun.
Wow. I'll let that one sink in. That's an interesting twist in advocacy. I guess I got to ask you. So you'll laugh, but Hamlin's razor, these insurers, what do you think? Never attribute to malice what could otherwise be perfectly well explained by stupidity. Which do you think it is?
Oh man, it's a bit of both. I think there's a callousness. There's a lot of Toms and Daisies in the insurance industry, right? They just kind of disappear off into their world of being paid very well and like never really think about the end user. There's also like a lack of contact with true patients, right? There's like not a lot of like patients who are involved in service design, which is like the fundamental problem. So like if you invent a mythical class of people who don't have problems and you call them members and then you charge them a premium, that is insurance. But if you actually want to think about like the problem of like most people, it is not that. They have complex lives. They might work 3 jobs. They have kids. They are tired. They then have to deal with this like letter from an insurer that uses words they don't understand. Or, they get the care and then post-pay, the insurer comes back to them and says like, yeah, just kidding. You now owe us money. And now with the, removal of the legislation that prevented this, this medical debt being put on their credit reports, these families face ruin, right? So like there's a lot of room for bad behavior through just being careless. And then there are some people who are just genuinely malicious. And I'd run across them in insurance. I remember a conversation distinctly with someone where I asked them about screening for colon cancer because I kind of had this inkling that we're going to see an explosion in colorectal cancer cases.
Which we have,
by the way. So noted. Where, I suggested that we increase our screening efforts and we look at, companies who are working on screening like the patients who'd be unwilling to undertake colonoscopies and other things. And the answer I got was it would be cheaper to let these people get cancer. And
when you say we, where were you when you were having this conversation?
Working for a large plan.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting when that is the commentary, because then you realize that actually and look, that may not be the position of a company. That's just one person's opinion, but that callousness that bleeds into the way that people think. I have seen, and we get the claim file on appeals that we file. So if the insurer denies, they have to provide the full designated record set, which is literally everything they've ever said. Teams messages, Slack messages, audio logs, call center stuff, you name it, evidence they use to adjudicate your care. Sometimes you'll get like United saying like, we'll only give you this evidence under subpoena. Okay, we're going to call that bluff pretty soon. But like you get everything. There was a case of a 40-something woman with lung cancer who was being denied out-of-network care at the only center that could provide it for her stage of lung cancer and who had the evidence to actually do a good job. And this care in total was $88,000, right? This person's younger than me, has 3 kids, right? The answer from the insurer was palliative care. And MD Anderson actually has like a record, like a great track record, like of, I think, greater than 50% of these patients being alive at 5 years, and the data's only getting stronger. So we got the claim file back, and there was an RN on the plan side who described this woman as a cancer victim. They said, it is inappropriate, and I'm paraphrasing, it is inappropriate for a stage 4 cancer victim to receive surgery. Quote. And then they assigned a bariatric surgeon to review the case. This is a thoracic surgery, thoracic oncology case. It's complicated. I did anatomy once, did some surgery once. There's a lot of clockwork going on in here. It's very different to doing bariatric surgery. And a bariatric surgeon probably isn't up to speed on it. Inappropriate. And then they had someone in Texas rubber stamp the denial. We have all of it, right? We have all of it. And then we've got a bunch of other information where they then said, like, any thoracic surgery can debulk a tumor. This is what they say when you're not looking. So I don't know what you call that, incompetence or malice. I just think it's callous behavior. People ought to know about it. And if you have a chronic disease, you ought to know what people are saying behind your back.
Hey, everyone. We'll get right back to the conversation after a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Arbiter, the care orchestration platform. In a healthcare system full of silos, Arbiter is a unifying layer. Backed by one of the largest early funding rounds in health tech history, Arbiter brings payers, providers, and patients together on one intelligent platform, routing referrals to the best in-network option, managing authorizations and outreach, and coordinating appointments seamlessly. See how it works at arbiter.ai.
So where does this go? You mentioned earlier, your thoughts, you were very coy about your thoughts on the insurance model. So where does it go? When you think about Claimable and the impact you're looking to have, there's no doubt from the socials and kind of what we're seeing by way of the press you're getting that you're helping real people. These are real people, real cases. These are faces, names. These are real human beings that you're impacting, which is phenomenal to see. Are you impacting the market in a big way? And where do you go? And where does insurance go?
I think there are people who are going to devise better methods for patients to get equitable access to care, employers to be able to access the market in an efficient way and offer benefits, right? It might be a direct pay model, for example. It might be some kind of cash pay plus catastrophic. Direct primary care shows promise of, eradicating effectively a lot of like nonsensical claims that would otherwise happen in primary care, and also take more risk into the community. Like my dream business, like when I thought about this and I reached out to him a while ago, it's like 3-4 years ago, was actually taking the data that a company like Amino has, like, right? Because they're in the employer market.
Navigation. Yeah, employer navigation.
And they would know by zip code, for example, like who needs what, like what is the makeup of the claims mix in a given zip code. And then you could effectively set up DPC with like a kind of per capita weighted specialist mix. So then you could keep a lot of that care in the community and keep it out of the most expensive setting of care and keep hospitals really for what they're meant for. That would make a ton of sense. It's hard to build in an interest rate environment and scale horizontally where, we're cresting 6-7%. That's hard. You'd need a lot of money to do it. But that would have been, I think something like that would make sense. I know there are people actively looking to like disrupt the PBM market who, are the poster child of like the negative effects of verticalization. I look forward to that. I look forward to that going away.
So I have a question for both of you, because you're in very different corners of the like payment space, and you both have just described the massive waste and inefficiency in the space, but you're taking different approaches. Do you think that venture capital is going to have success in revenue cycle management? Do you think that because of all these innovations that these VCs are backing, we will see reductions in the waste and inefficiency problem? I know you're both backed by venture capital, but like as you take a span out, like, are we investing in the right things? And maybe like a second part of that question, everybody's so hot on AI as like the next thing that's going to come into your space and transform it. I just wonder, like, are we going to enter into a future with just ever more sophisticated upcoding on the one side that
bot wars?
Yeah, and then plans on the other side, just like denying more and more and more. And like, does this enter into like stalemate madness, basically? So I don't know, big picture reflections. I'm going to hit you, Mike, and then we'll see what Warris thinks.
I was going to ask my dear friend Warris to go first, but I'm happy to go first. I think We are venture backed, my company, and I've been in this space myself a long time. So I've seen, for me, this is almost the fourth wave of kind of the new thing that's going to save rev cycle. So we'll see. To answer your first question first, I do think venture can have an enormous impact. And I think when you look across country, across industries, at so many things that have been game changers, venture's been a part of it. I think the challenge with venture is timelines. As we all know, if you want to meaningfully disrupt healthcare, we're talking about an enormously regulated space. We are talking about a space that's very complicated. You've got, an area where us as consumers actually are kind of the widgets. We think we're the consumers, we're not. You've got health systems and doctors and insurance companies all working together to put us through the mill, right? So it's a very, very complex ecosystem to try to crack. And I've been around and seen many of companies that get out to what an early stage venture group might like, which is 10, 20, 30 million ARR with, an application that's like next best screen, slightly better than yesterday's screen, right? But then they cap out. And no one wants to admit it, but this space is littered with zombie companies that get there and never get anywhere else because they can never become the systems of record because of who owns the space. So I think venture with the right horizon and with the right sober reality of what this space is and willing to kind of spend the time to get it right, I think can have an enormous impact. But my fear for early founders and appropriately calling this lifers, folks have been this a long time thinking they're going to kind of come in rosy cheeked, get their $5 million seed and off to the races. I do worry about that because, you will start to see folks get itchy when we're at 14, 15, 16 months, into an enterprise sales cycle, even if you have, something that's a great technology. I know so many folks come in from out of industry always saying the best software is going to win, the best AI, whatever that means today, is going to win. It just isn't true. The one that gets sold can win, but understanding that for folks that don't know this space well is very tricky. So, I think there's lots of headwinds for VC to really win here, but I think one, it can, and two, I don't know, Warris, how you think. I actually think it has to, because the reality is the entrenched interests are making a ton of cash in the way that things work right now. And somebody's got to kind of come in and throw a hammer into the China set, and who better than venture, to be able to do that. So I certainly hope so.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? New York Times came over like a couple of weeks ago to take some photos for an article, right? And in that article, and I hadn't seen it, but it was all about this denial of my inhaler that I had.
Let's take a step back. What were you wearing? Like, where were these photos?
Denim, but like as per usual, like I seem to dress like an out-of-work cowboy all the time, which is very unusual. Normally it's LA male midlife crisis where I have a black t-shirt and jeans or denim on denim. But regardless of whether it's pathological. But anyway, I saw this article and I had no idea really what it was going to be about. But there was a chart in there about denial rates going up. And I've had this contention that if revenue cycle management as backed by venture was going to work, we would be seeing denial rates inflecting downward already. And we are not. We are seeing them go up. So this is kind of like the old thing of like having a time traveler's party, putting it in a newspaper and setting a date to yesterday. Like it would have happened already if it was going to work. So what people don't realize is that there's a countervailing AI on the other side that's issuing step edits back to the rev cycle management platform. And oftentimes, some of these companies are on both sides. They're
so this
working
is where you're getting into my stalemate question, which is like,
well,
it's on both sides.
That's already there. That's already there.
Yeah, we're at tic-tac-toe. For those of us old enough, you ever see War Games?
Yeah, we're already there.
Spinning that, yeah.
And it's AI, so it doesn't just give up, which is what.
Well, I'll say with a but, Warris, and I'd love your take on this because you're out there on the D2C side, and our company we're kind of more in the B2B side. We're the tic-tac-toe engine. I mean, really, and we work on behalf of providers, and we're kind of fighting the bots on the other side. Our hope and our strategy is that eventually, for this to change, if it's going to change, and I hear you because it hasn't yet. And in fact, if you look over the longer tail, like 25, 30 years of RCM and the hundreds of billions of dollars spent, all the metrics keep getting worse. So we wasted a lot of money over a period of time, right? But I'll say, right? If you think, I'd love to hear how you were pitching investors. When I was out there, you look at kind of that juicy TAM, and I hate TAM in investor pitches, by the way, because so many folks go in and they say, well, it's a $5 trillion space. The cash has to go somewhere, right? If I could only get what percent, but billing and insurance related costs in U.S. healthcare, 800 some odd $billion, right? Think like Department of Defense, like that amount of spend on billing and insurance related costs in U.S. healthcare. And we went in with the countervailing pitch of can't be like that. You got to cut it in half. Otherwise, like healthcare in this country tanks. Like there's no like, oh, it's 800 billion now. It's going to be $1 billion and we're getting a piece of it, right? I wouldn't say every investor loves that pitch, but I do think there is if you back to something you said earlier on kind of motivations of these companies, if you think just super macro picture, right? Why is it the way that it is? You got motivations, right? You got a provider who wants to get paid as much as they can, and you got a payer who wants to pay as little as they can. That's just a financial motivation. There's no, and then you've got a technical challenge. It is really, really complicated right now to figure out what should get paid when, right? Like when you go into an insurance company and you ask, right, you appeal a denial, why did you deny this thing? They might tell you. They're probably going to tell you some version of, I have absolutely no idea. And the reality is they probably have absolutely no idea because there's 7 other vendors in the way that are all creating different rules underneath their policy that they then get paid an incentive to come up with.
Yep.
And that part of the business is run amok. Into Chrissy's point right now, it's like providers are buying bots to kind of try to fight that.
To double down on your war games analogy, or is it a metaphor? Not sure. But to double down on it, the best way to win is to not play, right? So if you're playing against the AI, the best way to win is to not play. So what we do is we're putting AI on the side of the patients whose appeals have to be read by a human. And there are all sorts of laws that protect a patient's right to full and fair review, whether it's a self-funded plan under ERISA, a fully insured plan, which would be covered by Affordable Care Act and state law. They have to use a qualified human to review this. Now, I'll be honest, there's some degree of like they're using AI to summarize the information so they can issue some kind of robotic response. And we're seeing this in the GLP-1 space right now, which is super interesting, but they're also like leaving the door wide open to a class action. So and we have all of the evidence. So I look forward to seeing how this goes for them. Spoiler alert, not well.
So, well, I mean, I guess like one question I have for you, Warris, and maybe I think you as well, Mike, because I would put you in this like camp of you're both quite outspoken. I don't think that a lot of people like in our industry, if I bring them onto a podcast like this, will just like say a bunch of stuff that like really adds up to not, it's kind of hard to even understand it. It's like, it's just so many buzzwords and everybody's kind of afraid. Like you said at the beginning, like people are afraid to call a spade a spade. Like nobody wants to talk about what's really going on. And instead we talk about engagement and innovation and all this stuff that like it's totally fine and safe to talk about. What we don't talk about is like what's broken and who the bad actors are. And maybe it's complicated because there's different bad actors depending on like what you're looking at, but we don't call it out. And you both do in very different ways. But like Mike, you've been on CNBC talking about the like how messed up it is. I'm not going to use bad language, but you've gone on CNBC and spoken out about this. And then Warris, you're out fighting, the health plans every single day. So like, what do you think, when you talk to fellow operators, fellow founders, and they say to you, I'm afraid to be outspoken because I also have to make these kinds of companies my customers. How do you tell them, like, how do you strike the balance?
That's a great question because it is true. And we think about it. I mean, we talk about it. 2 things I'd say to that. One, I think there's an interesting generational shift going on here where folks kind of in our age group grew up as VPs at a number of these companies. Warris and I both worked at payers. I worked on provider side as well. And there have been a lot of fundamental changes for our generation over that time period. Technological changes, right? That removed that technological barrier to knowing what should be paid, for example, leaving a motivation barrier. So this whole kind of, can we migrate our businesses forward? I think there's a generation of people that are ready to do that because we've sort of lived under this broken system that was put on us. We're the ones that are out there, my age, outing myself, but my age group, we're the early colonoscopy screening age group. Like I want that screening, right? Like I'm 44 with a family history, and so I think there's a generational aspect of it. And then I think there's an element of, look, something has to change. We all know that something has to change, and you're not going to be the one that changes it if you walk into a meeting or if you're afraid to talk about what's going on. As a startup, just being direct, like, why do you deserve to win? Why should I take you seriously as an incumbent when you're coming to pitch me if you're just going to say the same thing that I've heard for 30 years? Say something different, be something different, do something different. Tell me why you deserve to win. And that's going to be potentially an adversarial message. And you are challenging a status quo. So be a challenger. And like at the end of the day, 94% of startups don't make it anyway. So if you're going to go out
swinging. I love that. I actually put out a post on this on Second Opinion. We literally was like, be a challenger, because if you look at every single acquisition that anybody would consider to be halfway decent in healthcare, all the CEOs were total challengers. And it's because incumbents don't buy companies that are basically small versions of themselves. Like, they specifically want people around the table that will like challenge them and help them evolve. Otherwise, they don't exist anymore in 20 years. So I would love to see digital health kind of, gain a bit more confidence in itself.
Yeah.
Because it seems a bit like a lot of weak source right now, that like, I'm just I'm not inspired by, I'm not seeing the bite.
Yeah. Well, I'd say also too, though, like people need to know what that means. Like, I wish more politicians understood the difference between being tough and being a jerk. I don't mean kind of go out there and, go to an incumbent and beat him over the head and kind of use all kinds of half-baked facts and whatnot. I mean, understand what you are and really, really understand why you deserve to win. And then if you've got that lift, go through walls.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, seconded. Look, you don't want to lose being an also-ran, right? From my perspective, you want to live your values. And some of it is about making your corner of the world as perfect as you can make it. Just make it a little bit better. And if you can do that, it's honorable. It's completely honorable. Like, your investors will understand it. Customers will understand it. People will understand that you had an intent to make things better. The worst thing is when people just kind of asymptote toward the middle, and they're just, it's this kind of regression to the mean, I guess, and learned helplessness of things can't be any different because I can't imagine it to be any different. And that failure of imagination is like really what I think bounds the box. It bounds the box on the investment side. So when I pitch investors, the best pitches have been to VCs who are not trad healthcare investors. Like, they just don't get what I'm doing. They're just like, you're insane.
And you may be, but it has nothing to do with your company.
Totally. But the ones who like come from like fintech or, have a more of a general tech investing background, they're like, oh, this is really interesting for all of these reasons. And actually I can see all of the different ways this could go. And I can see that you're doing a humanitarian good at the same time. Sure, this sounds awesome. This sounds great. And we can show them real humans that we've helped in a short space of time. So like, you kind of have this tangibility around like the problem being solved in real time. Like, the loop is short, right? If your average time to resolving a case is 10 days and you give someone a reason to believe, and if you can do it enough, you can make it repeatable enough, then sure, why not? I mean, what I would say is, having left corporate, you take off the different jerseys, right? And same with politics and whatever else. So you take off the red jersey, the blue jersey, whatever, and then you just end up with a series of problems that need to be solved. And then your job as, a entrepreneur is to just call balls and strikes and decide, like, which of these things do you care about? And what are you going to do? And our whole team is aligned around that. It's a non-dogmatic approach.
Warris, I gotta say, I love that you started that off by pointing out that you should make your corner of the world more perfect, because you are also a huge neat freak. And I have seen your house, and it is extremely clean, even though you have multiple dogs.
Who are being oddly silent. They're both asleep, thankfully.
Can you create an automated appeal to my dogs so that way in my house? Because I would say I correspondingly do not have that clean of the house, but also have 2 dogs.
Well, I want to say thank you to both of you, because you've been amazing. Mike as a co-host, Warris as our guest for our new kind of rebranded Life as podcast, and just want to say thank you to both of you for the work that you do.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. Thank you, Chrissy. Warris, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you.
That's a wrap on Life Is. If you know someone else grinding it out in healthcare, send them this episode. And if you want more unfiltered takes on digital health, check out the Second Opinion newsletter, link in the show notes.